Hello, hello, hello. Okay, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. How are we doing? Oh, I don't think it's late yet, so there should still be some energy. How are we doing? Amazing. Okay, so welcome so much to this session by the Green Africa Youth Organization and the Slum Dwellers International. This is a cities and urbanization theme session that is titled Locally Led Innovations as Frontiers of Climate Action and Urban Resilience, Understanding Key Lessons and Opportunities for Scaling Up Community-Driven Innovative Strategies, Approaches, finance mechanism and technologies. This is a really important session because it affects everyone. How many of us here do not live in cities? If you're here, you don't live in a city. Let me see your hand. See? Okay, yes. Okay. So we live in cities, we live in settlements, so you're included. We're all included. This matters a lot to us. So please text a friend. Let a friend come here quickly because we have experienced speakers here who are going to share their thoughts with us on how they have made things work in cities in trying to reach urban resilience. And so we're expecting this room to be full by the end of the day. So please call them, tell them there are more seats so we can start. All right. I'm going to just say a little bit about what we want to achieve at the end of today. So we just want to explore barriers and opportunities to scale up and build long-term resilience of vulnerable communities, particularly with a focus on gender. We're going to interrogate the potential of co-producing climate action with the grassroots organizations in financing urban resilience efforts. We're going to amplify the experiences and lessons drawn from cited case studies as basis for constructing a sustainable financing mechanism for scaling up inclusive urban resilience actions. We're also going to demonstrate innovative pathways for gender-sensitive resilient building and inclusive financial solutions in urban centers. So if you have any expectation, please note it down. If you do not have, I hope these objectives gave you an expectations to note down. We're going to start with the introduction, and then we just move on to the panel discussion. So I'm Margaret Imprim. I'm with Green Africa Youth Organization. I work as the Assistant Global Coordinator for our Youth Climate Council's Global Alliance. I'm going to introduce our speakers and give them all 1 minute to briefly say more about themselves. So I'm going to start with the gentleman. Gender balance, I love it. So the gentleman, we have Joshua Ampontam, who is the founder for Green Africa Youth Organization and the co-director for the Youth Climate Justice Fund. Let's give it up for Joshua. Woo-hoo. Just 1 minute brief about yourself.
Well, you said it all. Well, the reality is that I've come to realize that cities is just a hotspot for young people. At the same time, cities are also having all the risks that make it very difficult for young people to thrive if development is not done right. And I think that over the past few years, I've taken a very big interest in how do we create safer cities, better cities, and more resilient cities for young people, particularly children, that they can thrive. And I know that in my projects where we work with informal waste workers or the informal sector, the relationship with children is directly connected to mothers. So the working conditions for women and mothers automatically impact the development of children, and the resilience argument there is extremely urgent and needs to happen right away. So really looking forward to this session and hearing from the experts here.
Thank you. Next, okay, we have Kathy Bowman McLeod. I hope I had your name right.
Very close.
Perfect. Okay. She's the CEO for Climate Resilience for All. Let's give it up for her.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So Climate Resilience for All is a global NGO focused on addressing the multiple impacts of extreme heat for vulnerable communities through a gender lens. And so you may know that extreme heat affects women disproportionately, and in particular their income. And we want agency, and we want empowerment, and that means income, and that means protecting our health. And so we just recently was the director of the Adrienne Arst Rockefeller Foundation Resilience Center, and left with a handful of colleagues and with the 100% certainty that we have to invest in women to reach the goals we want to on adaptation and resilience. And our tagline is, when women are climate resilient, we are all climate resilient. And I have a whole bunch of stickers, one for everyone in this room. And if you bring someone in to fill a chair, you get 2. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And next speaker, we have Fiona Mugambi, who is with Octavia Carbon. Fiona?
Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Fiona Mugambi, and I'm the Growth and Partnerships Lead at Octavia Carbon, doing a lot of Chief of Staff work there. So what we do at Octavia Carbon, we design and build low-cost direct air capture technology in Nairobi, Kenya. So I think for us, we are keen to share perspectives on locally led innovation. I mean, we have 47 people, of which, just from University of Nairobi, JKUAT, all these people just being at the frontier of deep climate technologies. And this just shows that, Africa cannot be just victims, but you're also solution providers. And by doing so, we are really championing for, how do we ensure that this kind of education gets to the grassroots communities.
Thank you. Our next person is Jane Wairutu from SDI Kenya.
Hi everyone, my name is Jane Wairutu, working with Slum Dwellers International. And Slum Dwellers International is a movement of slum dwellers in over 26 countries globally, in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. And we are a social movement that is women-led, that is driving a collective bottom-up approach towards change for inclusive and resilient cities. And we focus on advocacy around land, housing, and services. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm really excited. We have a salad of expertise from various sectors, and I'm really excited to learn a bit or two, more than a bit or two, and I'm really sure that you're excited to learn some things as well. We're going to zoom right into the panel discussions. We're going to start with the gentleman. All right, Josh, you have 2 hats here, so I'm going to give you 2 questions for those hats. So let's wear the founder for Gaio hat. All right. So a number of things Gaio does, particularly the zero waste strategy, has built the resilience of a number of urban cities. Please share with us how far this initiative has gone and if there have been some successes and challenges.
Well, thanks for asking that. So in 2018, we started something called the Zero Waste Cities Initiative. The idea was that if cities were going to be resilient in most parts of Africa, waste management would be a big part of that journey. And that was because open burning represents one of the biggest challenges for many cities. Plastic waste is another big challenge that we see, and even to some extent becomes a catalyst for flood risk in some cities. And then the last part was 65% of cities' waste in Africa is still organic waste, which has a huge potential for building resilience in many ways, but then this all become a source of methane in the landfill site. So in 2018, we started this journey of how do we do this? And when we started that journey, what we saw immediately was that actual formal waste management companies do not do the work that is required to get waste out of the street and to get waste out of places where they actually become a risk for residents. Instead, it's actually a lot of women who go around every day collecting waste out of desperation for job or out of desperation for income. And because it is not a recognized sector, it comes with a lot of risk. And some of these risks include harassment. Some of them include even sometimes being described or being perceived as a thief, which brings a lot of risk to the work that they do, of course, with the absence of PPEs and other health risk. Secondly, a lot of these women have children with them, and they cannot leave the child anywhere, so they take the child along with them to the dump site. And a lot of these children are exposed to a high level of toxins on the dump site. So in recognizing that, our approach of working with sort of waste management companies immediately changed to how do we work with the informal sector to make sure that they deal with waste in a way that it can actually become sort of a contributor to resilience than rather being a risk to communities. Some of the success stories that have happened from that time till now is being able to work with the waste sector in a way that we do not necessarily formalize them, but we integrate them into the municipality structure, which means that the municipal recognize the role that they play and are able to actually cut part of their budget to support the work that they do. Initially, and I've seen this also many places, that their goal for many NGOs is to formalize the informal sector. If you look at a continent like Africa, formalizing things is difficult because the whole economy is running on informality. and it is something that allows smallholder workers to thrive. And the moment you formalize it, you take away a certain level of potential away from them. So instead of formalizing, we started working on integration. Integration means that people can still have the flexibility of being informal, but still be able to access all the resources and all the services that their former counterparts will be able to do. So that became very important. The second part was, once the integration was done, we provided them with better working conditions, either they themselves setting up a material recovery facility where they can then work, and in this facility creating a space where the children and other minors are able to really have a space where they work away from the dump site itself. And then the third part was providing them with the PPEs and other essential resources they need. Some of the resilience angle here has to do with allowing and training waste workers and the municipality itself to understand the risk associated with the work that they do. So flooding was one of the big ones in Accra, and we did a whole research to do the correlation between waste and flood risk. And then you see immediately that when you have better waste management system, your risk of flood actually lowers in certain part of the city because the wastes are not clogging the drains and increasing the chances. The second part is food. 65% of waste on the continent is organic waste, but then it's already mixed with plastics, which makes it difficult for you to use it for anything at all. So it goes to a landfill site and it becomes a source of methane. What we've done is to work with the same women and some young people to take that organic waste directly away from homes and produce compost out of that. And currently we have one of the biggest community-led composting facility that is purely run by the local people, providing organic compost and supplying that to farmers. In cities, what they are doing is taking care of unused spaces in the cities and growing food in these spaces. And while you might think that this is going to be very small and micro, one of the urban farmers that we work with, Maxwell, and I went around to see all the different sites he has, and some of them is like the space of this pavilion. But he has several of such spaces across the city. And every day he has people who are operating restaurants and eating places calling him, can you supply me with lettuce? Can you supply me with cabbage? Because those people are selling those things at a premium price because they are saying it's organic, it's not using, it's local, it's organic. They're using all the terminologies that make things premium, obviously. And that is generating income for this urban farmer. And we're seeing the potential of that growing. And what is going to happen in the next phase of this project is really being able to do that and innovating to even do vertical farms using such compost to produce more food in cities. Now, this is a resilient approach because a lot of cities do not grow their own food. And they expect food to come from other parts of the country. Now, what it does is that it takes the relationship that people have with food away. And that is what results in a lot of food waste, when the relationship with food becomes just an economic purchasing or a transaction. As long as I have money, I can have whatever I want, which means I can also waste it if I don't want to eat it. And what we are seeing is that when people actually see where their food is grown, they have more appreciation for it, and they actually consume a bit more wisely, and it reduces the food waste, which happens a lot in cities compared to rural areas. So these are some of the stories that we are seeing. And the last thing I'll share is that in empowering women in this space, one of the things that I really want to emphasize is actually trusting such, I'll say, disadvantaged groups with direct resources. When we started our work, we would, of course, get a grant, and we will work with them on this grant. And we've gotten to a place where we literally just facilitate the transaction of money from a foundation to the group directly. Because over the past 3 years, we've worked with them to really understand what setup and structures they need to be able to handle money. And we've seen many other organizations still receiving money on behalf of such groups and being the decision makers on what the money is supposed to do. And the moment we did this of actually making them have access to their own resources, having a bank account, managing their own money, it gave them a certain level of power, which they had already, but was actually either taken away from them through other organizations who want to help. Then the second part is all the global conversations that happen around waste. And what we did was that when the plastic treaty started and the first meeting they had in Kenya on the negotiations, we took informal waste workers to that negotiation and added a translator to support them in taking part of the conversation. But the fact that they had to go and we had to help them get a passport, get a visa, travel for the first time, all of those things really empowered the community of waste workers to really feel that they are actually the people doing the real work, and they are valued, they are respected, and it actually boosted their confidence in the work that they do. And I think these are some of the principles that I really would want to echo for other people working in this sector to really uphold. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you. Let's go to Jane. What are some of the approaches and strategies that you and SDI have been taking up in collaboration with the informal sector and rural settlement in building their resilience capacities?
So some of the approaches that we have been taking up first is carrying out community-led data collection processes. So we find that in the urban cities or in the big cities, up to 55% of residents are informal settlement dwellers. And you find that this information is not readily available at the county and national level government. So what we have done is work with especially women to collect their own data, to present their own data and share the issues that they are facing to local authorities, to the non-state actors, so that we can have interventions around the issues that they are facing. And especially issues around risks like flooding, heat, and a lot of banning of informal settlements. So we do data collection through qualitative and quantitative methods, and the qualitative methods are through storytelling. So we have a component known as Know Your City TV that produces stories from the grassroots. And these stories are put up or developed by youth within the informal settlements. And then they're put up in a website where they are showcased to the world and to everyone to just understand the issues that communities are facing. And I think yesterday in one of the sessions, we had a very good video from a KYC TV representative showing a case of Zambia and the issues around data and the issues around climate change. Just trying to understand, do communities know what climate change is? And you hear the voices of the women and the young people saying, first of all, before you talk about climate change, we are hungry. We don't have toilets, we don't have water. So we need to prioritize these issues in terms of development, in terms of infrastructure as a priority. So storytelling has been a very key and powerful way of sharing data. The other way is through co-production. And when we're doing our processes, we have collaborations with both state and non-state actors to come up with solutions that benefit communities. And not to say that communities do not have knowledge. They have a lot of knowledge, and through co-production together with communities, the NGO or civil society, and even the academia, we have been able to come up with solutions that are all round and that represent the voices of the communities we are dealing with. And one example is a project we did in Kenya, the Mukuru Special Planning Area. We had 48 organizations together with the city government of Nairobi, coming together to plan for families, 100,000 families who were seated in around 600 acres of land. And the area doesn't have services. And one thing that we did is have a lot of community consultation sessions where the communities gave out suggestions on the kind of plans they'd want for their area and the kind of infrastructure they'd want. And through this process, we influenced the planning process, the normal standards of planning. So we were able to convince the county government and even the academia the need for coming up with alternative planning solutions. So let's say you want to do like a 30-meter road within an informal settlement, you can as well, reduce the size of the road and come up with a solution that still has very minimal displacement. So one key thing was around influencing the planning standards and coming up with alternative ones. We also have cases or case studies or best practices from Philippines and India in terms of housing innovations and housing upgrading. Then another thing is around financing. So SDI is organized in a way that it's women who come together through saving schemes, and they put their money together through a saving scheme to support their livelihoods and also to support their development. And we have seen women construct their own house and their own homes. We have seen women also come up with resilient funds. Like in example, in Malawi, during Hurricane Japheth, we had the women savings groups using their savings to sort of build back after the hurricane. So there's a lot of also resource with communities. And also we are seeing that there's need to support communities around financing and resource mobilization, and that the communities also have their own resources. They have their own finances. They just need a little bit of support to, to top up. Then lastly, I think there's the Roof Over Our Heads campaign that was launched last year, and it's supporting women especially to collaborate in development of housing, that will not be affected in the next, climate change adversities that communities face. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Let's move to Fiona. Please share with us Octavia Carbon's contribution towards building urban resilience against climate change.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure how I'm going to be able to top up what these incredible people have said here, but I think for Octavia Carbon, how we look at it is more about, we usually say about, going, you either give someone fish or you teach them how to fish. So for Octavia Carbon, we are a climate tech startup, so you find that most of our skills, especially at Octavia, we have a lot of engineers, we have a lot of scientists. So what we do, we ensure that, especially right now in Kenya, we are at a very pivotal moment where we have a lot of companies coming into the country because, of our grid, it's super clean, our geology and the talent that we have. But then you see that then there's a problem. We have people who are living in upcoming towns, in cities where they do not have those kind of skills. They do not know how to, prepare a chemical filter. They do not know how to best build a body that is going to remove the CO2 from the atmosphere. So what we do a lot of local training and hiring. And how do we do this? Before we even just start local training and hiring, we go to the community and we tell them, look here, this is what climate science tells us. Obviously, we do not give them too much maths. We just tell them, look here. And they actually do understand because we are adversely affected by the effects of climate change, right? So we just tell them, because of this and this is happening, because of our past experiences, you can contribute in fighting climate change. You can contribute by being at the vanguard of fighting climate change. And the way you can do this is, number one, you can come in to our facility. We can teach you how to do welding, spot welding, TIG welding, and we give them the skills to do that. It's an onboarding program that takes 3 to 6 months, just showing them how to do welding. If it's for doing electrical connections, we sponsor some of these people to go to the TVET colleges so that they can do their diploma in electrical assembly. So we do a lot of this training so that once they are able to come, we do this kind of sponsorship such that by the time we are going to do our project Hummingbird, by the time we are launching our pilot plant, these are the people who will come and maintain the pilot plant, who will be there when we need machines to be serviced, when we need the machines to be switched on or off, or really just maintain the machines. And by doing so, we've not just told them what climate change is, and not really just telling them what climate change is, but we've also given them a roof over their heads. By doing so, by giving these people jobs, you're creating prosperity in that community. These people do not have to migrate to different cities and this whole climate migration, because you've actually given them the tools. And what at Octavia Carbon we tell them it's not just about climate action here, it's climate action and still giving you a roof over your heads. You can still take your kids to school. So for Octavia Carbon, for us, it's more really about giving the tools to our communities for them to succeed.
Amazing. Moving on to Kathy. You have many years of experience in building innovative, risk-informed strategies for financing mechanisms and smart policy solutions for climate change and its impact on people and communities. Can you share some of your successes in supporting local communities in attaining urban resilience?
Thank you. I'd love to. I want to bridge from something that really each person said, and that was this idea of the top up, that there's so much already happening that when you think about an organization like ours, what's the best role we can play? And I think it's the top up. Is there something that's been learned and succeeded over here that could work over here? Or is there a piece of evidence base that might accelerate the effectiveness of that? Or is there a person who could talk to that person because they share experiences and values, and that would help us accelerate the impact that we're trying to have? And I think we, in the Resilience Hub, I'm in a time warp like so many people. I don't know what day it is, but some days ago, we announced our Women's Climate Shock Insurance Initiative. And for the first time, and same idea of bringing the farmers for the first time, the passport, and now Miriam Bibi of course, has her passport, but she'd never been to a COP before, and Miriam is the CEO of Kwendo Core, and that means Sister's Room in Pashto. And she has operated, built, founded, and has run with colleagues for 30 years, an organization that helps build agency and choice for women in one of the most remote regions and challenged regions in Pakistan. And so she had not been to a COP. They think about all the challenges that they have that are water and sanitation and poverty-driven and conflicts. And she said here, right in this little space, she said, climate words are English words, and our communities are suffering from climate effects, but they're not using those words to describe them. And so a couple of examples quickly. The Women's Climate Shock Insurance is a micro-insurance. It's a parametric insurance. And not everyone loves insurance as much as I do, but insurance can be a tool to help finance climate adaptation and risk reduction. And this, see, it's driving people away. I'm so sorry. I'm teasing. No, it's okay. I scared her. Yeah. So the microinsurance, a parametric is, and so if you have a fire in your kitchen, you have your homeowner's insurance, that's an indemnity policy. And what that means is that if the fire happens, someone comes to your kitchen and says, you've had about, $30,000 worth of damage to your kitchen, and we will send you a check. But it takes time, and you have this adjuster, and they come. The parametric is triggered on something happening. So if the temperature reaches X, the barometric pressure drops to Y, you can combine those sorts of triggers. Money gets paid to the account very quickly. And you'll have heard at the COP here many ambition and solid progress toward forecast-based products. So in our work with the Self-Employed Women's Association, we tested in the heat season of this year a first parametric for extreme heat to support income. And so when the temperature reached a certain point, each woman is banked. She has her own bank account, and so money would come to her account and support her income. And so because it's too hot to work, and as you all probably know, women are disproportionately impacted by heat, but our organs shut down. Women working in solid waste facilities have blisters on their hands and rashes 24/7, and miscarrying their babies, feel dizzy, urinary tract infections. This is climate on women right now. It's on vulnerable communities, but it's especially on women. And so this mechanism is intended to provide income in lieu of going to work. So let's get paid and not go die at work as we expose ourselves to heat. However, we don't just want to transfer that risk, we want to reduce the risk. And so through focus groups with the SEVA grassroots leaders, we asked, what are the things that you need? What's a piece of equipment that would help you protect your health? And so a whole slew of things like a thermos, a cool box, a tarp to cover crops to keep them from roasting. It's also useful in a flood. And solar lights so you could work at night, because women can't work when the men are working because they have to take care of the kids. And so men can go to work, but women are missing an entire shift, and that means a whole shift of income. And so it's important to keep the focus on the income. And so this mechanism pays out when it gets too hot, provides a piece of equipment. The new plan will be for heat and for flood, and it will provide an early warning system. And so the members of SEVA and the community members of Quendo Core don't have access to good early warning. And not just early warning. What should I do when I get the warning? Okay, you're telling me a flood is coming. You're telling me it's hot. What should I do? And we need to segment those audiences and understand which channels of trust information flows, and best done with the grassroots leaders of these organizations. And so the extreme heat insurance, what it showed is that there was immense value derived from the program, even though the trigger was never met. And this is an experiment, so we have to keep working. Also, the data that tells you how hot it is, the source of that data is really important. We use NASA data. It'd be better if we had ground level data that said this is what the temperature is, where this person is working. And so there's a lot of improvements to be had. But I think one of the big idea here is that we want to get to a place where we are paying out on the forecast. And so we don't have to wait until this thing happens. We know that 5 days out that these temperatures are going to be at this level, and that gives all kinds of choice and option to people when they are paid 5 days out. And in the focus groups, we learned, they said, we'll change our arrangements with our kids. We'll change what we are going to buy for our meals. We would rearrange our work schedule. I mean, all sorts of things that they would do with early warning and early money. And so that's one example. And another quick one is that we work with Eugenia Cargbo from Freetown. And many of you, I hope, have met Mayor Yvonne Aki Sawyer, very dynamic mayor of Freetown. And she has a Freetown is the Tree Town initiative. And we work together with Eugenia, who's the chief heat officer there, to design with the governance structures of the markets in Freetown a shade structure. So there's no shade in the markets, and the fruits and vegetables and the products are roasting in the sun and losing value, and shade with solar lights and fans would help. And so in 3 of the largest markets in Freetown, we work together for the design by the women who run the markets. What should it look like? What should it be made of? And so we have a vision for shade with solar lights and fans for markets all over places where women need to, and men, but women and kids are standing outside in the sun, and we can protect health and protect income and increase safety and security. And so I just want to acknowledge that these solutions, however, you might say like shade, is that really where we are? Shade? It's so simple. Water, shade, some money not to work and die when it's hot. That is where we are. And that's how urgent this is. And at the same time that we do these things, we know we have to change the systems. We know that we have to correct the way that the inequality is so great that the only choice for those women is to pull recycling from that, or the compostable material, or whatever it is. That's the choice. And so we've got some big work to do, but in the meantime, the climate crisis is so dire that yes, shade and water and money is the way to go. Thank you.
Awesome. I like the fact that you ended with money. We're moving to money. Really important aspect of urban resilience. You cannot do this without money. So we're going back to Josh, this time he wearing his YTJF cap. All right. So you have first-hand experience on the need of financing community innovative strategies based on what you're doing. Please share with us the challenges that are faced in financing locally led initiatives, particularly the ones that target urban resilience, and what can be done financially to reach that point where brilliant strategies like this and all the other ones that have been mentioned are easily and effectively replicated and scaled up.
Thanks. Tricky question. I guess my first response will be that everyone wants to fund something cool. And the definition of cool has drifted away from the basic things that are needed to just allow people to survive to things that are unnecessarily complicated and sophisticated. I mean, I've worked with young people, and as we set up the Youth Climate Justice Fund because no funder wants to fund boreholes anymore because apparently it's old school, and the water aids and the World Visions have been doing this for many years, and it's no longer a big deal. But water is water. And if you don't have water and you need access to water, yes, it might take a borehole for you to get it. But that is not cool anymore because it's an old school thing that has been funded for many years. So that doesn't happen anymore. And a lot of the solutions that Kathy was talking about falls in the same category. No one is interested in funding some shade in a market. It doesn't sound cool. So as a funder, funders are like, can you come up with something cooler, something fancy that I feel nice to say that I'm a funder of this thing? And a lot of it have become very like digitalized and tech-based innovations, which I find a lot of problems with because at a very grassroots level, it's not really needed in many cases. It's as simple as having access to water, having access to food, having access to clean air, and having basic income, and having access to healthcare. These are the basic things that needs to happen. And a lot of people don't have access to this. So that became a reason for us to really set up the Youth Climate Justice Fund because a lot more young people were telling us that these are the issues that they wouldn't get any funder funding because it's not considered fancy, cool, modern, whatever. And then the other issue was that when you start looking at things from climate and social justice, it has very much complications to climate funders. The climate funders want to go strictly to either measurements that are strictly on the climate side, so either emissions or how much quantity of waste you've taken from one place to point B, how much kilograms of organic waste we've processed into compost, and they completely ignore the social justice aspect, which is the harassment, right, that women face, which is the issues that have to do with losing sort of hours of shift because you have to take care of the kids, which has to do with gender-based violence in many ways. And they completely cut that out, and they really focused so much on the plastics, the emissions, and all of that. And I think that the youth movement really is one of the movements that I'm very happy working with because they are able to really marry all these other social injustice issues with the climate injustices, and they want to sort of project this. But in projecting that, it doesn't resonate with every funder, so they end up not having resources. So the Youth Climate Justice Fund basically has been set up to mobilize funding as a pool fund from different sources and grant that to grassroots organizations that are really looking at social justice issues and its intersection with climate. So we are funding projects that are not necessarily sexy or fancy, but projects that actually works locally to make people thrive. And I think that the other thing I would say when it comes to finance is that we need to stop financing for survival and finance for thriving. And I think that is the situation we find ourselves in. I mean, I did my master's research on forecast-based financing, which should be the way to go. And Kathy, you mentioned that briefly. You should be able to fund something before the person actually die. Like you don't need to, the money is there. It's not like the money is not there. When disasters happen, money flows. So why do we have to wait for the disaster to happen first and then commit a lot of resources to go do the cleanup, to go do the emergency response, and to do about 6 months to 1 year of building back? And we call it building back better. But it's not actually building back better, because building back better will be that you prevent the thing from happening in the first place. And currently, it's been so difficult when I work with people in the disaster risk field to convince funders to fund forecast-based financing. Because the assumption is that, what if I fund it and the event doesn't actually happen? Well, that intervention will still be good for that community, with or without. Having health insurance is good for you, whether or not you face a flood risk or whether flooding actually happens. Having access to a place where you can store your grains is good for you, whether the flooding happens or not. So really, I think this is where the finance conversation needs to go. How do we finance to prevent the impact and actually focus on prevention and preparedness, focus on preparedness and prevention, as opposed to really waiting for things to happen and then releasing amount of money to go into that. And then how do we fund things that simply work, whether they are fancy or not? They work, it make people safer, it make them thrive. That should be our focus. Thanks.
All right. So Fiona would have to leave because she has to attend. So I'm just going to give you like a minute to sign off. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think there was something slightly there I disagreed with. I come from, my background is engineering. what we do a lot of, we just work on climate and we build climate tech solutions. So when you say that we should not focus so much on technology, you're really criticizing one end of the spectrum. I do not disagree with the work you're doing with the youth. I do not disagree with the work you've been doing. I do not disagree that we need water. I do not disagree we need shade. I do not disagree we need climate resilient solutions. What I disagree with is, criticizing one end of the spectrum, because we are all working towards the same goal. We are all working towards net zero. We all want our grandchildren to be here 2050, to have clean air. We all want that to work. So fine, let people who can be able to work on technological solutions that removes carbon from the atmosphere, let them do that work, and let people who want to plant trees so that we can remove that CO2, so that we can limit warming below 2 degrees. For folks who are working in ensuring that we have great cities such that there's no floods in waste management, let them do that. But once we now focus on saying, oh, let's not fund this, then you're pitting people against each other in climate, and that's where we go wrong. I think let's let people do what they are experienced to do, rather than criticizing people, because if we work together, we're going to get to we're going to keep that 1.5 degree goal alive. So maybe let's keep on criticizing people. And I have to rush. I did not mean to provoke. I'm just saying I'm a techie. I love working in climate. I want to continue working in climate, but it doesn't really help the narrative when we say one solution is better than the other one. Let's fund this one. Let's not fund the other one. We all have a common goal. We all want to have one Earth. We all want 2050 generations after us to still be there. And thank you so much for inviting me. Please invite me again. I love being here. What a great panel. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We're just going to continue. We have just 2 questions for you, and then we just wrap up with Q&A. So we're very limited on time, so I think we'd have to be quite brief on this one. So let me move to Jane. I want you to also share with us what are some of the finance mechanisms that have been explored in scaling up the innovative strategies you mentioned have been going on in the communities you work with.
So the finance mechanisms that have been explored are by working with community savings groups, which are predominantly women-led, and using these savings to pilot ideas around housing, access to water. And I'll just be very particular in terms of housing. We have had women saving very little money to start, to just buy land and then also build a shelter incrementally without having to, get a loan from the bank, but through their own savings and through their own network, in their own ways. And at times it gets very complicated when it comes to scaling up, because the government at times is not willing to scale up some of these solutions because they feel like maybe, I'd say what he said, these houses are not very fancy, they're not shiny enough, they're not what the government wants to invest in. And they're very simple. They're very simply designed for communities, and the communities are the ones who say, this is what we can afford, and this is the kind of housing we want. But we find that there's a lot of large-scale housing that is taking place in our countries in form of affordable housing, which is not even close to affordable for the poor people. So, and the low-income communities, because the cost is way high. It's just the terminology they use to sort of complicate, to sort of confuse. I always say they confuse the communities by saying it's affordable. So when you meet low-income communities, they say, oh, we are doing affordable housing. But it's not affordable. What only works is social housing, housing that is below, let's say, a particular amount of money. So I think that's the biggest challenge when it comes to scaling up. So we only find agencies coming up to support the initiatives that communities are doing to scale up most of their projects. So like he said, I sort of agree. If it's not fancy enough, it's not funded. And then also the private sector at times find communities very complicated. They assume communities are complicated and full of propaganda. So they do not want to invest in their time to work with communities or even scale up solutions that people like Gaio are doing in terms of even waste collection and solid waste management. So we have very many initiatives, even in Kenya, by the youth around waste, but cannot be scaled up, you know. Then there's this categorization again of, you know, youth in they're profiled as, you know, difficult. We have a category of the hard-to-reach youth, you know, hard-to-reach communities that do not even get that support from anyone. So I think it's more of people being open. I think the government should be very open, and the private sector should not feel afraid of supporting and scaling up innovations that are being made by the communities.
Be open to funding things that don't seem fancy. Thank you so much. All right, we're going to conclude with you, Kathy, and then we give some minutes room for Q&A. All right, can you share with us some tools that urban cities and also slum dwellers can develop in effectively attaining the resources needed in building resilience amidst climate shocks?
Yes, thank you. And I just wanted to comment on the exchange over what's fancy or not fancy. And what I heard is that philanthropy and institutional donors are showing preference for gadgets and things that sparkle in the way of its, you know, tech or blockchain. Or it wasn't so much that I heard you saying that you were you know, saying that one of the, you know, that I didn't hear you saying, well, let's not do the technology. We need the technology. And so your question, resources and how can communities marshal those resources? There are several places, and I didn't touch on this with the Freetown is a tree town, but the future of our cities, settlements and otherwise, they're too hot. They can't. The thriving idea is a dream unless we address how hot they are, and the job creations potential is immense for nature-based solutions and using coatings that cool the roof and systems for water and cooling in terms of micro businesses and engaging people in urban forestry that can do some of the aggregation of even urban carbon credits. And while the carbon markets have, I mean, this is a little bit dramatic, but it's the end of COP, so you can be dramatic, turn their noses up at the smallness of carbon offset in urban areas and the challenges. I think that narrative is old and tired. We're not there anymore. It's a new day. And there's opportunity to store carbon and protect the aquifer and cool a city and a settlement and engage people to pay people to aggregate those credits, manage and tell the story of what nature is doing in communities, and think through where do the coatings, if we put a coating on every roof that needed it and the corrugated steel, how much would it cost and who would do it and where are the coatings? And there's a business model in there and jobs for people to retrofit the communities as they are with these things that we know work. And again, we can use technology, we can use sensors for understanding the temperatures inside dwellings, and that's happening. We can use clothing that people wear that cools their bodies so that they can continue to work. I mean, there are some gadgets that we can use, but getting back to the core things that people need to thrive, and bringing resources in without the strings attached, which is, I think, what you're saying. And I think that case is really close to being made because the desperate situation that we're in and how untenable where we are is now.
All right, thank you so much. For the sake of time, I'm gonna give space for two questions. Anyone? Questions? Yes. Yes. Okay. All right.
Okay, Shishma, thank you for your presentation. My question related about the statistic and data collection and data source. You are say about the quantitative and the qualitative method for the collection the data, but you know that some of the data it's coming from administrative record and another data it's coming from survey. Now, it's more related about the resilience. Now, all the countries has got to calculate the data by use the GIS and remote sensing and geospatial data. There is any method you are applied and you are advised to apply it? Another question for him related about the waste management. You are say something related about the solid waste management and organic waste, but you know that some of the countries now is suffering from the increase of the e-waste. The e-waste it is the classification of the hazardous waste, and all the countries now it is the commitment regarding the Stockholm and Basel Convention to this increase the quantity of the e-waste because there will be effect in the health. In Jordan, I have the first project for the e-waste generation. I'm making the dismantling for all the kind of the electronic and electrical devices. I am started to from the informal sectors because you know that the scavengers is working in these sectors without any hygiene and without the protect. Especially the children is suffering from the increase about the impact of the e-waste and the quantity, because the quantity of the e-waste it is include the mercury and lead. What you are advice regarding this, and thank you for your answer.
Okay, so you have just 2 minutes. Just 2 minutes each. Okay, you want to start, Jane? Just 2 minutes, all right.
So I hope I understood the question correctly. I think it was around the methods of data collection, the quantitative, qualitative, yet there is a lot of spatial data collection that is happening nowadays, new technology. So I think when it comes to data collection, SDI does social economic data collection first using Kobo Collect, and we upload on a server called ONA, our server as SDI. So we have moved away from using the conventional way of collecting surveys using paper. Then another thing that we do is we do GIS mapping. So when we do GIS mapping, we map from the city level, and this is the informal settlements. We'll map from the city level to the household level. So from the city, we know the number of informal settlements. We know the number of villages within an informal settlement, that is the local level, up to the structure and the household level. So we use satellite imagery to help us map up to the household level. And we train community core researchers, we call them community core researchers, to do that data collection to that level, to that lowest level. And so far, we have managed to, profile 7,712 informal settlements in 212 cities globally, and that has been done through also GIS, just looking at the boundaries and then looking at the settlement level. In terms of even services, we map services using GPS and collate all that work using GIS. Thank you.
All right, 2 minutes, yes.
So Accra, where we do some of our work, was had the largest e-waste dump site in the world as of 2018. And these were televisions, fridges, and all of that in the field. And I did a research there in 2015 where you will find children with high levels of zinc or copper and lead and mercury in their blood because they are living at this site. And it's constant burning of the waste to get the metals to sell. And the approach that some of the development agencies had done was to, again, provide them with techie solutions, which people will not use because it's expensive for them to use that. And they would easily set fire into a television, burn everything, and get the copper and sell it, than to go and pay money and breathe the air. They don't care. When people's livelihood rely on something, forget about your fancy solution. They might not do it if it doesn't generate them income and doesn't allow them to get the money that they need. And when they burn it, 10 minutes is burnt, they get the copper right there, they sell it, they get their $2, there they go. It's very straight, it's very simple, and they prefer that, right? It's unhealthy. A lot of them have died out of this. But when the government wanted to close this site down, it is a place that employs almost about 40,000 people. It's almost a community at this point, even though it's a dump site. And they fought the government for not closing that site down. And I think that what needs to happen is that countries like ours that import a lot of electronics need to have a relationship with the producers and the manufacturers. We need to be able to trace those products and make it the responsibility of the manufacturer to set up the refurbishment systems in those countries and train local people to do the refurbishment. Because burning it doesn't help us, it doesn't help the planet as a whole, but also it doesn't give any responsibility to the manufacturer and the producer. They just ship everything down there, it stays in our countries. After 2-3 years, sometimes some of them are already end of life, and the only option, because you cannot repair it, you don't have the expertise for that, you ban it. So I think the advocacy now is really how do we work with the manufacturers to really trace their products, set up refurbishment systems, train local people that can actually refurbish some of these materials to do that. And quickly to clarify, I'm sorry that Fiona had to leave. And it's sad for me or unfortunate that she took offense with my advocacy towards funding local communities for non-fancy things that work. I mean, it's the same as asking for funding for adaptation doesn't mean that you see if someone shouldn't fund mitigation. I think from wherever you stand, there is something that is important to you, and you would advocate from that perspective. So I think that, it's not that tech solutions or digital solutions shouldn't be funded. Africa and M-Pesa and mobile money is one of those things that we take pride in, that we are a continent that really advanced this, and it's great. But that shouldn't mean that philanthropy and businesses should invest solely in that field or have a high preference for that field. Because while they do that, we also really need to look at the very micro things that are less expensive, easily implemented, like a shade. It's as simple as putting structures together, putting some straw on top of it, and it prevents people from standing in the heat all day. And I think those things really require just an advocacy for funders to also look into that sector a little bit.
Amazing. Thank you. You asked all 2 questions. You've exhausted the questions. Thank you for that. And thank you so much, our panelists. And just to say that we have a virtual person who is listening actually to this and will be giving us a lovely music, which will be shared with us. Yes. Not now, shared with us after. So please, just as you registered to be part of this session, just look out for that and you definitely hear the music talking about what we have shared today. I'm going to give it to Evans to just give the closer remarks and then we'll call it a day.
Thank you, Margaret. Maybe briefly, thank you to our panelists. I think that was very beautiful and productive contributions. I think what we have taken out from the presentations is that climate change is a transboundary, cross-sectoral, professions, transdisciplinary. I think it doesn't necessarily respect whether an engineer or a community member. I think there is consensus as well that we need to work as professions. But I think the question that I noted from the contributions across all the panelists is how can we, if we are serious about replication and scaling up, how can we also look at the affordability part and also on the scalability part? So all these high-tech interventions, which are very necessary, but how can we ensure that we are able to replicate them and reach the low-cost communities? Then the other issue also that I noted is how can we respond to the micro level data so that we can't continue generalized climate change interventions, but we have also to respond to the specific issues that are affecting specific contexts in our settlements. Then the other issue also that I also noted is the need for co-production or the need to work together again, as disciplines, but I think the emphasis was on communities. As it was rightly said by the panelists, that increasingly our world is growing in the urban, but unfortunately it's growing informally. In the informal sector, usually it's now very, in terms of vulnerability, the incomes are very low. But how can we also tap into their rich expertise in terms of the knowing how to live in those settlements, but then also build that capacity and include them in our decision making? I think that is one very key issue that also came out very strongly. Then lastly, there was the issue of looking specifically on the climate change intervention, the safety of it. I think normally we tend to generalize climate change actions, but I think thanks to Joshua, he raised, I think, one critical issue, that safety of climate change interventions is also very critical, that more often we might be excited by our interventions, but totally forget to also look on the safety of some of the climate change interventions. Solid waste management, I think it's cut across most of our developing countries, it's being done, but looking at the safety as well and beautiful interventions that they are doing in Accra. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. Have a great evening. Bye-bye.